Hello and welcome, fellow Marvel fans, to the Snark Industries podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Remy.
And we invite you to join us as we work our way through every Marvel TV show, movie, and crossover, meaning if there's a Marvel character on screen, it's fair game. All categorized in the temporal order of their setting. By the time we're done, we'll have built a complete start-to-finish timeline of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. To accomplish this goal and to have a bit of fun along the way, each episode will be split into two parts, the watch party and the deep dive. If you're hearing this, you found one of our deep dives. This is where we slow things down and take a more pragmatic, in-depth look at a piece of Marvel media. We'll walk through the full plot, explore connections to the wider MCU and Marvel Comics, highlight Easter eggs, unpack lore, and of course, give you our own personal thoughts and feelings. Although this episode stands on its own, it is designed to complement the watch party. So, if you haven't watched along with us yet, we highly recommend starting there first and coming back here for the full breakdown. Most importantly, we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this incredible journey. We're not affiliated with Marvel in any way, shape, or form. We're just fans who are passionate about these stories and these characters and wish to share them with everyone in a new and exciting way. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Snark Industries.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the deep dive for Snark Industries. We just got done watching Betrayal, episode 5 of Spider-Noir. John, what was that about?
All right, so we pick back up right after the end of episode 4, where Kat and Ben were smooshing booties, and we get a little bit of a unpacking of Ben's past for the first time in the series.
Yeah.
He's kind of hinted at some stuff before, but not really gone down the rabbit hole, so to speak. But we go down the rabbit hole here. We have a flashback back to World War I, where he's fighting at a German prison camp, and he runs into this unit that includes all the characters that we've seen so far that have already been enhanced. Sandman, Tombstone, and others that we don't really know necessarily by first name, at least yet, or what they can do.
Right.
And they're kind of there in the prison, and he's kind of trying to set them free and everything, obviously, and pushes deeper into this facility and finds that in addition to just holding these prisoners, there's also this room full of weird experiments, because why not? Why not us?
Because Marvel.
Yeah, because Marvel. And so you've got people laying on these gurneys, and they're kind of hooked up to various jars of different animals. We see snakes, we see scorpions, we see centipedes, just to name a few.
Eel.
Yeah, an eel was in one of them. Eel man, and everything. And so, we're kind of looking through and seeing these different sort of amalgamations of animals and people. So, they've got weird scales and blisters kind of growing on them. And Ben walks up to this one guy who's kind of like turned away from the camera. I have no idea why. And asks him,
Weird.
hey, buddy, you okay? And as he reaches over, the man rolls over, and he's half man, half spider, Spider-Man or whatever. And he's just he's by far the worst gone out of the bunch, for best I could tell.
Yeah.
As his face is literally like half arachnid. And this guy leans over and says, "Thank you, Ben, for saving me." Oh, no, that's not what he does. He said bites him in the arm. And we are to assume here that this is how Ben received his powers in this rendition of Spider-Man's story, from Man Spider-Man Spider.
Official name.
I think that was in the credits. I have to go back and check my notes.
Yeah.
So he survives this bite, and obviously has come through to turn into the Spider since then himself, luckily not getting any of the weird metamorphosis type things that happen. So then we fast forward back to the present day, and finishes his story up that he's telling Kat, admits to her that the only reason that really he even took her case to start with is because he was kind of curious about these powers and how this tied in with Flint and everything, and his own powers and getting that power. It's not really clear, honestly. He seems to have some sort of an ulterior motive for accepting it, even though it's turned into something more amorous here on the back end.
Oh.
So that's kind of happens as a setting the stage for the episode. And then we've got kind of 3 different things sort of pulling together all at once. We've got Robbie, who has taken his story about the enhanced peoples to the Bugle and is able to use that to leverage his job back. Not only getting a desk in the bullpen downstairs, but also getting them to agree to use his story as is. If we recall from an earlier episode, they took one of his stories and chopped it up and made it their own and sort of reported some fake news. The fake news started in the 30s. You heard it here first, folks.
1932. Here it is.
Yeah. So it started there.
Talk about origin stories.
Exactly. He's kind of working on that. And we have ultimately, as all these people are coming together, he's doing that. We have Flint, who goes and gets Lonnie from the slums where he was, has a very brief conversation with him, and ultimately changes his entire perspective on how he's done everything through the episodes so far, which I thought was kind of an abrupt change, but perhaps there are some differences here that we see in the future. So with him there working with Silvermane, they all go and break out Megawatt from prison, who has this big, like, sort of Shakespearean performance as he's tied to a chair and getting tortured, and then they free him, and he, Horatios that guy to death with his electricity powers.
Oof. Yeah.
But that's
intense.
That's what he does. We also have a new character that's sort of introduced here, a Dr. Faber, who they discover through talking with Lonnie back at the agency before this, is the one who has been working with all of these POWs that have these powers. Or they didn't have these powers, or at least these powers hadn't manifested yet. But after she started working on them, suddenly here they are. So they feel that she's doing some sort of sinister work there, and Robbie and Ben go and try to figure out what that is. Robbie bringing her outside of her office for an interview, and Ben breaks into her office and finds the worst hidden drawer in hidden drawer history and is able to pull the files and has the information on all these various different enhanced peoples. As he's doing so, she comes back and, he plays dumb and, I'm not in the right place, and is able to, in theory, escape. However, unbeknownst to him, he is recognized by her assistant, a man by the name of Ogden, who just so happened, luckily for everybody, was there at that POW camp when Ben came to save him in that flashback scene. So they realized that he was there. They checked that poorly hidden secret drawer and see that the secret contents within it had been taken. Okay, so now they've got that going on. So we then have a brief meeting where Ben goes and sees Silvermane, who's now got his army of superpowered goons ready to go, all in their fancy gangster clothes and ready to fight, and ultimately tells Ben, hey, I've got some business with the mayor. I want you to tell your buddy the Spider to stay out of it, or else he's going to get hurt. And then Nick Cage does what Nick Cage does best. They've made everything awkward and said a bunch of weird stuff to try to provoke these other guys, and ultimately leaves the room.
Very Nick Cage scene.
Yeah, very Nick Cage. So, okay, now we've all kind of got this going on. He decides then it's going to be best to sort of leave, right? He's gonna take Cat. He's going to go. This is getting too hot. Things are going crazy. It's time to get out of here. He convinces her to go. She kind of starts packing up and everything. But as this all kind of comes into play, she then goes and talks to Flint back at the original sort of place where she performed. And almost seems like a kind of goodbye scene in its own right. But, it's really just kind of a check-in. And we do see Lonnie kind of save her from a falling beam, which so maybe kind of implies that he's maybe not so bad of a guy as that one conversation made it seem to be, but he's still working for Silvermane immediately without any sort of remorse, which is kind of weird. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, as all this kind of happens and all this kind of comes to fruition, the point stands that these enhanced individuals, and they look into these files that they got from Dr. Faber's office, and these enhanced individuals, this work that she's doing on them that awakened their powers that have been lying dormant since this experiment happened is killing them. And this kind of puts Kat in a spiral who she still clearly cares enough about Flint to not want him to die, if not just outright still loves him, period. Not super clear her motivations, which I think is kind of fitting for her, are kind of up and down and all over the place here. But so she goes to Dr. Faber, who is packing up to leave because, she's going to be found out and she's all going to go to ruin because of these files that were taken. The reporter's going to run the story and it's all over, and says like, hey, what's going on here? I hear that you are looking for the Spider. You think that somehow he is the key to stopping these mutations from happening, which you learned that from Lonnie back at the theater after he saved her from the falling beam.
Right.
How he knew that, not super clear. Apparently she told him at some point in the past. Dr. Faber did. So she comes to him, in an attempt to find a way to save Flint. How she must save Flint is by betraying Ben and revealing his biggest secret. And as far as we know, outside of his very innermost circle, she's the only one that knows. Mm-hmm. I think just Robbie, right? Robbie and her.
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, from best we could tell. So anyway, and she goes and they present it, and boy, she doesn't think about it long, no. And she immediately says, his name's Ben Reilly. And then that's where the episode ends.
and there was a promise not to hurt him, but
that is true. That is true.
That's not going to be followed through.
The promise was that he wouldn't get hurt from this, but yeah, that's not how these stories go.
Yeah.
But yeah, she didn't really think about it long and went ahead and dropped his name. And that's kind of where the cliffhanger is left here in terms of this episode. And boy, it's wanting me to see what's happened next, because this has been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think that's one of our longest recaps to this point.
There was a lot of moving parts in this one, I feel like.
A lot of moving parts. Yeah.
So, all right. But I'll get to thoughts and feelings at the end, as we usually do. Let's talk briefly about tie-ins. And when I say briefly, I mean very briefly, because once again, there aren't very many. Spider-Noir, as we've discussed before, is a Sonyverse standalone universe within the Sonyverse. It is as far removed from MCU proper as we can probably get. Still familiar names, even if not familiar faces, familiar stories, even if changed from a radioactive spider to Spider-Man, but it's still kind of the same vibe. You get bit by some weirdo and now you're a superhero. In terms of MCU tie-ins, that's really about all there is. We don't need to bog down with the details there, but how about some more comic book stuff? I know it might be some repeats as all this is the same series, but maybe anything new or exciting that you noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. The new and exciting that I saw was certainly having to do with that flashback, that story that he told. The critters that you mentioned, of course, we saw a scorpion, we saw eel, so we've got electricity, we've got the scorpion, we saw a snake. I mean, all kinds of critters. So maybe there's potential to see the lizard. Maybe there's potential to see other villains come from this one group. I mean, they just set up this group of 20 some odd soldiers, and we only know 5 of them so far. Right. So I'm interested to see if they're going to continue pulling from that. But that being the case, the spider bite, as you mentioned, has always been a spider. So it's kind of cool to see that they almost brought in the man spider from the 90s cartoon, which prior to this, they had actually talked about bringing into What If in 2021, but it was deemed too dark for that show, which I thought is kind of wild because they showed it on the 90s cartoon.
Well, the 90s were a dark time.
Fair point. But as we all know, the spider bite typically, as you said, happens to Spider-Man from a radioactive spider in Amazing Fantasy 15 in 1962. So to see that kind of flipped on its head and, be done by what is essentially the live action version of the man spider, really kind of cool. It's not uncommon to see the doctor character that is trying to solve something and worsening it. That's kind of, speaking of Dr. Connors, that is a huge thing that we see from Dr. Connors. It's a very typical trope in Spider-Man. So it's fun to see it kind of brought to live action there. And then there's the wish to be rid of his power. He's talking about wanting to get rid of his power. And this is something that Peter Parker came across numerous times in his run. It's kind of fun to see all of these themes not directly tying to the comic, but very much coming from the same era of comics. Mm-hmm. And finally, kind of fun to see things like the Island of Dr. Moreau, if you don't know, is a classic H.G. Wells. He experiments between human and animal combination. So we're kind of getting a parallel to that. Maybe not an Easter egg, but certainly a lift from a classic novel. As far as Easter eggs, tidbits, all that is concerned, that's all I saw. I'm sure there's probably more because, things happen so quickly. But overall, what'd you think?
Yeah, so I continue to enjoy this show.
Yeah.
It's not let me down yet. And this episode was no exception. As we said, and you mentioned one of the longer recaps we've had to do. But I think that's a good testament to all the moving parts that are happening here and a really a good story that they're weaving together like a web. See what I did? So no, but it's interesting, all the things that they're doing. They've taken some liberties for sure with some of the characters. I don't know if I particularly love that man spider is the one that bit him versus a spider, but I don't hate it either because, as we said before, it is a standalone universe in a standalone universe outside of the MCU proper and everything else. So it has no real bearing on anything outside of this one tale. And so looking at it through that lens, I'm less mad about that as I would be if this was Tom Holland that received this treatment, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, I mean, the story itself and, and then the flipping this thing on its head so quickly, you've got Ben and Kat at the end of last episode, seemingly falling for each other, doing a little open mouth kissing. And then at the end of this episode, she's like, it's Ben, go fight him.
Yeah, they're talking about running away together.
Yeah, they're talking about running away together.
Oh, man.
Retiring and then, just going somewhere, just the two of them. And all it took was, one conversation. And she's like, well, I'm ready to just not do any of that.
Yeah.
So
rough.
Definitely. And I do think that's kind of, because I've always kind of looked at Black Cat as like this roguish, not rogue the person, but roguish, like the genre type person, type character.
For sure.
Where the motivations and the allegiances aren't super crystal clear. And I think they're doing a good job with that here, because I didn't expect that to happen. This idea that either, like we said before, she's still in love with Flint or is a good enough person where even if she's moved on from him, she doesn't want him to die, but she's willing to dangle Ben as a carrot on a stick in front of all this stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, as all this is going down, you also have Silvermane going on in the background, getting ready to wage war against the government of New York,
right?
With his army of superpowered goons.
Yeah, that was kind of just put aside this episode.
Yeah, because I mean, it's so easy to that's what I mean. There's so many moving parts. It's so easy to just gloss over that's going on in the background as this like big reveal happens. I'm really enjoying it, man. I mean, there's 3 episodes left, and I can't wait to watch them.
Wow.
So that's where I'm at. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to basically echo you, man. It's so much fun. Despite Nick Cage being Nick Cage and his very, very odd moments.
Asterisk disclaimer for everything that we say is in spite of Nick Cage.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
His interaction with Dirk or Megawatt this episode was special.
God, it was so weird.
Very special. I don't know what to make of that. But with that exception, I actually was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and they were talking about potentially starting. I'm like, I was 100% in the camp of starting it. Like, I encourage it highly because it's ridiculous, because it's corny, because it's fun. It's because it knows what it is. It's just a good ride. And as you said, well written. The recap taking as long as it was or has is great because it means that there's so much to talk about because there are so many interesting stories taking place. It'd be very easy to make a 5-second recap if it weren't interesting. Yeah. So I'm loving it, and I'm really intrigued to see where these last episodes are going to take us because 3 episodes seems like very little time to wrap this up.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah.
Or they're going to set it up for a second season, which we haven't heard if it's going to be in one yet.
At the time of this recording, not confirmed or denied, but I kind of hope that it does, unless they really fall off the back end here on these last 3 episodes. Right. I really hope that they
let's see how they stick the landing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, don't want to put the cart before the horse for sure.
Right. But all in all, having a blast and cannot wait to see the rest.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, folks, we will see you for the next ones. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Snark Industries podcast. To join the conversation and further explore the Marvel Cinematic Universe with us, head on over to snarkindustriespod.com. The link will be in the show notes. But with that, we will see you in the next adventure.
Here we go.